The Pro Show is brought to you by Rockin' Media and our proprietary Flash HDR photo process, providing you with the best, most realistic photos of your property. See the difference at rockinmedia.com. Hi, and welcome to the Pro Show. I'm Rick Machle, and we have a wonderful show for you today. We're talking about questions you should be asking a listing agent when you're interviewing different agents. These are questions that you hopefully will have them bring up themselves or answered themselves, but you should be ready with a list of these questions in case they don't bring them up, so you can ask them. In addition to that, we're talking about how to stage a living room. Greg's going to be talking about rental properties, and Nancy, once again, on mortgages. That's all next on The Pro Show. Today we have two awesome agents from Coldwell Banker. Debbie Jacobs is joining us from the South Metro office. How are you doing, Debbie?
Great. It's a beautiful day in Colorado, as usual.
As always. And how about you, Carrie? Carrie Holmes is up in northern Colorado. How you doing, Carrie?
Wonderful. Happy Monday, Rick.
It's great to have both of you with us today. We've got a great program coming up. This week, we're going to look at the year-over-year statistics for the Denver metro area as provided to us by the Denver Metro Association of Realtors. And this is for November 24 versus November 23. And if we look at active listings, they're up 4.3% to 12,822 from 12,297. The under contracts are also way up 22.5% from 3,110 last year to 3,811 this year. New listings are basically flat. Last year there were 3,542. This year there's 3,546. Sold listings are up 10.4% to 3,825 from 3,466, so that's good news. However, the days on market are up from 42 last year to 51 this year. That's a 21% increase. The median sales price is up 3.6% to $575,000 from $555,000. And the average sales price is up 4.6% from $658,968 to $689,086. And the percent of list price received is flat at 98.4%. So, Debbie, since you are our pro down in the metro area on with us today, what are you seeing out there? Are you seeing these numbers seem to make sense?
Yes, and I work a lot in the Denver Tech Center, which is Cherry Creek School District, specifically to the Cherry Creek School District that goes into Cherry Creek High School. And that is showing exactly that. We've got 13 active listings right now, and we have 80 closed listings in the last 6 months. In that particular neighborhood, last year, we had 64 closings in that neighborhood. So you can really see those numbers are also, relating to the Cherry Creek School District as well.
Well, that's good news. I mean, it's great to see the sales up year over year. And as we head up north, these statistics are provided to us by Realtor.com. The inventory in Larimer County is up 34.2% from 1,016 in November of last year to 1,363 this year. In Weld County, the sales inventory is up 16.8% from 971 to 1,135. And in addition to that, we have days on market are up 26.8% from 51 last year to 65 this year in Larimer County. And in Weld County, they're up 23.4% from 47 days to 58 days. The median list price is down 1.4% from $607,500 last year to $599,000 this year. That's in Larimer County. And in Weld County, they're up 3.2% from $513,325 to $530,000 even this year. And new listing counts are up 19.7% this year in Larimer County from 334 to 400 this year. And in Weld County, they're actually flat. So, Carrie, tell me, what are you seeing out there? Do these numbers reflect what you're seeing in the market?
Absolutely, Rick. So we are seeing that inventory's up, and that's definitely a direct correlation with days on market being up. So with the days on market, that just means the time that it takes to sell the home. And when you have more homes on the market, that's more inventory for the buyers to pick from. And so, yes, that is a direct correlation. It's also a correlation with sales price. So typically when we have more inventory, then sellers are more motivated to negotiate on price. We do see a little downtick on sales price as well.
And are you, either of you, finding it's making a difference on price point, or it's across the board?
In the tech center, there is a couple of properties. There are a couple of properties that have been on the market for almost 200 days. So you can see that we're seeing a lot more inventory being able to be scooped up kind of at the end of the year. I do expect those properties to be under contract with a reduced price here pretty soon.
Carrie?
Absolutely, Rick. I think just as we gravitate towards the end of the year, we are going to see that the prices have balanced out. And when they balance out, then it's time for buyers to get in and make an offer as far as that goes. So I think, the thing to keep in mind is these days on market might seem scary and insurmountable. However, this is just indicative of a balanced market, which is where we really need to be.
It's better than being in a crazy market when those poor buyers could not get a break. If you're one of 20, you'll have a very small chance of getting that home. And so it's great for buyers right now, and it's great for homeowners because they're getting a realistic price on their home based on what normal markets are like. So that's really good for the market as a whole. Like every week, we have Rick Machle from Real Property Management. Hi, Greg.
Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, awesome. So it's probably wise as a landlord to do periodic inspections. What's involved in that, and what do you need to do so you don't get in trouble?
Absolutely. Those are great questions, Rick. And it is very important. Periodic inspections are ones that we write specifically into our lease so that the tenants are prepared for that. It gives the landlord an opportunity to be able to visit the property, make sure there's not unauthorized pets, unauthorized drug use, unauthorized occupants, whatever the case may be. It gives them a chance to put their eyes on what is for most landlords their most expensive asset, or certainly one of their most expensive assets. So that is something that, so long as it's agreed upon in the lease, is very easy to do. Now, what we have found, there's a particular cadence that judges up and down the Front Range have said if you're doing that roughly on every other month or quarterly basis, you're fine. If you're doing it more frequently then you're beginning to get into the territory of violating the laws of quiet enjoyment, which means tenants have a right just to enjoy the property as they leased it, and they don't want landlords breathing down their neck. But all of that said, it is an absolute net benefit to the landlord. Highly recommend it to any of our landlords that we work with and or others that are doing it themselves.
But you have to have that in the lease. You can't, if you forget to put it in, you may have locked yourself out, right?
Could have locked yourself out. Yep. Colorado law is very specific. If there is an emergency, you can show up at any time, meaning the hot water heater is, leaking water out of the garage and it's the middle of January and it's 0 degrees. And now there's an ice slide outside. You can absolutely access your property. You can also do it with 24 hours notice. All of that said, it is best to have that agreed upon so that a judge doesn't even have to render an opinion on it as to whether or not you can or can't inspect your own investment properties.
And what about just inspecting the exterior? Say I'm leasing a house, a single family home, and it's not a condo, and I just want to walk around, make sure the lawn's being watered in the backyard. Is that all doable without advance warning, or is it just going into the house?
Yes, it is. That is all doable. You do have to give the tenants 24 hours notice on that. It's not considered an emergency to do that. And again, when you have put a tenant into the property, they have their rights to quiet enjoyment, and that includes the landlord not coming over and scoping out the backyard when the kids may be playing out in the backyard, or any combination thereof. So notice is what's most important. The lease specifies so that you don't have challenges in court.
Okay, so you could make it less, and if everybody agrees, it's all good. But
Yes.
most likely 24
Absolutely.
hours is going to be fine, because it's not like
You
the
got it.
lawn's going to go dead in that extra 24 hours. So,
That is correct.
well, that's awesome. Why don't we talk next week about it from the tenants' side? What do you think about that?
I would love that, Rick. Lots to talk about on that front as well.
All right. So if you want to get a hold of Greg, feel free to reach out to him at the number here on the screen. And as always, appreciate you being on the show. Thanks, Greg. Interviewing an agent for somebody to list your home, there are many questions that you want to be asking. And so we figured we'd tee these up and give you some questions that you need to be asking agents so that you find the right agent for you, because every agent's different, you're different, and you want to make sure it's a good match for you, and not just because they're your sister-in-law or because they're your best friend, and that they actually are your the best agent. Of course, if Debbie or Carrie were your sister-in-law or best friend, they would be the perfect agent. But in this case, so we're going to start off with, okay, what are some questions, or a question, and we'll just kind of rapid fire go through these. Carrie, you start.
How long have you been in the business? That's a great start.
Okay, and Debbie.
What percentage of sales price do you achieve for your closed listings?
And why is that important?
Well, it shows how the pricing strategy was accurate or not accurate from the very beginning. I do think that that's very important, because you don't want to get into a situation where you've priced your property way too high or way too low. So that percentage of success, I guess, would be important to know.
And Carrie, what do you
Definitely agree with Debbie on that, because let's just say historically, there have been realtors who have been known to what we call buy a listing. And what that means is they tell the seller something that maybe the seller wants to hear in order to win the listing. When in reality, as professionals, we really need to give the seller the information that is true and accurate so they can make their own informed decision. So we're not out there. We're all competing every day pretty much for our jobs, but we need to be realistic. We need to be a straight shooter, and we're not there to tell you something you want to hear in order to, quote, win the listing.
And so if they say, well, I don't really keep track of that, that might be a good sign that they are buying, might be overshooting the market in a general sense, because you want to be as close as possible, correct, Debbie?
Definitely. It makes such a enormous difference for the seller's experience that it can't be overstated how important that is.
And Carrie, I want to back up to your first question. Is there, not necessarily what is your answer, but is there like a number of years that you found in working not only yourself, but also in with other agents, where you find, whether they're on the opposite side of a transaction, that you find, okay, if they've been in the market for, as an agent professionally for X years, what is that number you find that then shows they have more of a clue? They're not just right out of real estate school.
Well, that's a great question, Rick. And they say if you can make it 5 years in real estate, you've made it. So I think that's a good number or a good gauge. Now, if they've been in the business 4 years and they've had a lot of transactions, then that's a great indication as well. So it's not a hard and fast number. It's how much business are you doing? Because I could have been in the business for 10 years and I'm only selling one house a year. Well, that doesn't equate to a solid real estate professional that's in the market, that knows what they're doing on a daily basis.
And perhaps been really good in their first 4 years and was doing a dozen listings a year, which I think is good. I don't know how many listings, that might be a good question I would ask. How many listings have you done in a given year? How many do you take on? What's another question you would have somebody ask you, Carrie?
Well, I think just to pop back to your question, the average real estate agent sells about 12 to 13 homes a year. So I think you want to at least be going with somebody that has that many transactions per year. So I think that's a great number to kind of keep in mind when you are talking with real estate agents. And so I think that's one of the things that's going to be important moving forward. For me, it's not so much about how many listings do you have. I think a lot of people say, well, how many listings have you had in my neighborhood? Well, your neighborhood might have only had 2 sales in the last year. So for me, it's a broader picture. How many sales have you had in this market? What's your marketing strategy? I think those are the higher level questions, because I think people want to be neighborhood specific, but we need to have a broader perspective. Now, I may have sold, numerous homes in your neighborhood over the 20 years I've been doing real estate, but we need to have that broader outlook when you're choosing a real estate professional.
So it sounds like your next question might be, what's your marketing strategy for my home?
Absolutely, Rick.
They tied together. How about you, Debbie?
Well, I think another important question would be, what price point do you work in? If you are interviewing agents, and some agents are working in a specific price point, and let's just say your listing, your house is $1.5 million. You might want to interview and just double check and make sure that $1.5 million or $2 million property is something that's been, already achieved by that particular agent. So I think price point does give a little bit more balance. I also think that some of the agents that have been in the real estate for a really long time that do not do a lot of transactions in a year, that also might not be a good fit.
Interesting. So it's both sides of that you might be a new agent, and because you're getting started, you haven't done a lot of listings. And on the opposite side, you've been in the industry a while, and you're basically living off of referrals and not doing a lot of marketing per se, correct, Debbie?
Correct. And I also think that sometimes the education level of a newer agent could actually be a benefit. If they're very good on a good team, or they're on a good with a good company, compared to someone that has been in the industry for decades that may not be as sharp on some of the newer technologies or newer marketing strategies that are out there. So
if I'm in the luxury market, say, what is it, $1 million plus? Is that typically in both these $1.2 million? I don't know what million. What is luxury these days? What is luxury in these days?
2 million, Rick.
2 million. Man, I have been out of the market too long. Okay, so I'm in the luxury market. Can an agent, if I'm an agent that hasn't done any, is it better to hire somebody? Because it seems like that would be a really finite way or a different way of marketing a home, is in the luxury market versus everybody else. Debbie? I think that there's a lot of different areas that you can advertise for in luxury. So if there's global luxury, we also have international luxury components. It is also very important to find out whether or not that individual agent has the ability to reach out to other states for the global luxury or for luxury. So that would be another question to definitely ask and be very, very familiar with before you chose an agent. And other questions, Carrie, or you want to go down that path?
I think it's all very property specific as well. So I think, if you've got a multi-million-dollar property that's lakefront, or maybe it's a horse property, we definitely need to have an agent that's experienced and knowledgeable. And I'm going to utilize different marketing strategies for both properties. Or say I've got something in Old Town Fort Collins. That's going to be a different marketing strategy. So really the marketing needs to be customized to that particular property, and it just can't be one blank slate kind of strategy. So you want to make sure that what is my realtor going to do that stands it apart from every other property that they're marketing out there.
Okay. Debbie, you got another question that you would want somebody to ask you?
Sure. Does that agent do open houses? Are they successful at open houses? Do they have a lot of activity? And how do they advertise for open houses? Yeah, again, it's just an additional marketing strategy that's very important. People look at open houses without their agent, and it is important to draw that crowd.
Okay. And Carrie, you got a question that you think people should be asking?
I think that it's one of those things as far as, do you do maybe some pre-marketing, some coming soon advertising? And I think there's both benefits and negatives to that strategy. So again, it's definitely property specific. And if you are doing a coming soon strategy, why is that important on this particular property? Because many times maybe it coming soon doesn't make sense. We just need to get it on the market, get it out to the broader real estate community. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And a follow-up question is, why is that important for my property?
Okay. And any other questions that I should be asking as I'm sitting down with you to find out whether you're the right agent for me? Either of you.
I would say that possibly finding out what happens if, do they have a team? Do they have assistants? What happens if they have more than one listing going on at one time? What is their strategy for availability?
So finding out how busy they are. Are they going to give you the time, and you're listing the time of day? It seems, Carrie.
I think another great question to ask is, what is your communication style and expectation? Sometimes we have sellers that might think, well, I expect a call or a contact from you every day, or you just need to know what is your listing agent strategy and time frame. For myself, it's one of those things that I like to communicate more on a weekly basis, because from my perspective, I'd rather be out there advertising and marketing your property, but I don't want my client to feel like I'm not out there doing work on their behalf. So we just need to make sure that we're on the same page on the onset, so we can all be knowledgeable as far as where my time is being allocated to successfully sell your home. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
So it seems like that would be something where I can say, I'd really like to be contacted daily. Is that how you work? And you can then have that conversation, right?
Exactly, just so they know. And even if that's not how I particularly work, it's just about having that conversation and setting that expectation on the onset. That way nobody has any misunderstandings. And either, if that doesn't work for the client, then maybe that's not the right fit, or maybe the listing agent can adjust and will adjust their communication strategy moving forward with this particular client. So it's just about being transparent before you get under contract with that listing agent.
Debbie, any others that come to mind? Questions or you?
I couldn't agree more with Carrie. I think that having a basis and a strategy of a whole case of what ifs. What if we get under contract right away? What if we get multiple offers? What if we get to a situation where we might need to do a price adjustment? And having those kinds of strategies ahead of time are questions that you might want to ask, what's going to be the strategies so that you understand, what to expect.
I think another question you definitely want to be sure to talk about with your prospective listing agent, and Debbie touched on this, are you going to be the communication person that I'm going to be dealing with throughout the entire part of the transaction? I know some agents, they, start and they do the marketing component, and then once they get under contract, they pass you along to a different team member. And that might be beneficial for some. For myself personally, I think it's critically important to have consistency throughout the transaction. So myself, I personally am involved throughout the entire process. I do the listing strategy, I do the marketing strategy, do the negotiations, through the pricing strategy. It just provides consistency for my seller, and I know all the nuances and backstory of my seller, so we can just make this as successful as possible instead of maybe getting handed off to another team member throughout that process.
Debbie, you work much the same way, right?
I am very hands-on. I couldn't agree more with Carrie. I think that consistency is very key. I also think that it makes it very easy to continue to look at the seller's goals that were established at probably the very beginning meeting. So that is another thing that you might look into asking your listing agent, these are my goals. How do you think that you'll achieve them? I think that during the middle of the transaction, sometimes if that agent has handed it off to a team member, that new team member may not have any of the goals actually even in mind or in the forefront. And I think that when you get into inspection resolution, especially, and possibly appraisal, there is sometimes a tumultuous area of the transaction, and that an experienced agent is going to be able to walk you through and remove some of that emotional stress that is happening during that inspection resolution to be able to achieve your goal and to be able to continue to focus on what the end goal really was.
So if I'm talking to somebody who has a team, the question would be, how do you handle those handoffs? How do I make sure things don't get dropped? How do you make sure those elements don't get dropped? Because, you guys you work more independently, but there are teams out there, and obviously it happens where they drop, but a lot of times it doesn't happen because they figured out a process. So it'd be asking, what is your process, correct? Would make sense to ask them if they do have a team.
Exactly, Rick. There's a lot of great agents and teams out there by all means. So just know what does that look like, right? As far as, again, it's just setting those expectations on the onset. That way everybody's clear and there aren't any misunderstandings, and there are a lot of great teams out there. So it's just knowing how your realtor works and what makes sense for their level of business.
Yes, because you don't want to have the expectation that I'm talking to Carrie the whole time, and then the next person I talk to, and I don't see Carrie until the closing table, and I never found that out. And sometimes I could imagine that gets hidden because the people that are in front of a team are also very good salespeople, and so that would be a good question to ask. Are you going to be dealing with me throughout the entire process? Hands-on, or am I going to be handed off? Would be a good way to ask. And how do you handle that handoff? Debbie?
And I am on a team.
Yeah, that's right.
And yes, so we have an 8-person team that is very successful in the Metro Denver area here. But what happens with my team is that I am independent and I handle the transaction. But if for some reason I have, another obligation and something needs to be handled immediately, I do have a backup. So that does give me a little bit of a benefit in that particular avenue. But again, I'm on point on the transaction the entire way through.
And that would be a good thing to ask too, is if you are part of a team, how do you handle your transactions? Because there are some that literally they take they go under contract and you see them at closing. There are others like Debbie who basically has a team as support. And I would think a question would be good is, what kind of support do you have if something comes up? You get sick, you have to go out of town, you have a family member die, and you've got to leave. How does my transaction keep going? That seems like that would be a good question to ask too.
It sure is, Rick. And any great agent will tell you that on the onset, because we know that this is a huge financial transaction for you. So we want to answer all those questions that we can think of on the onset to put you at ease, even at the listing appointment. I want people to know that I have people that can step in at a moment's notice in the case that something arises. So I think that's something that we all want to make sure that you're confident and comfortable working with us, and that nothing is going to get dropped in the unforeseen issue that might arise.
Well, that's good information. Any other critical questions they should be asking?
I think another one everybody kind of wants to know is, how does this work? Now, do I have to meet with you and sign contracts? Are we going to do this electronically? Do I need to be at closing? There's a lot of little nuances there that if you're a busy professional or family and you don't have the time to be meeting in person and signing all these documents, how are we able to streamline this process? Because I think as agents, the easier we can make this for our clients, the more beneficial it is, because it is a stressful transaction. And so we want to take as much as that off your plate as we can. So I think that's one of the things that's important to communicate as well, just on the onset, to know how are we going to be able to keep this moving forward in a seamless manner.
And I think, Debbie, probably a good question is, how do you get paid and how much?
Oh, definitely. That is very important. I think that that's very important. And I think that that's an initial conversation to have during that listing appointment. I think that it's right now very confusing because of some of the new legislation that has come about in August of 2024. I think that really is going to be a significant portion of the listing agreement conversation, because the buyer's agency can change. You could also revert back or continue to pay, have basically the seller sponsor the compensation for the buyer. And that is probably a 15-minute conversation about how all of that is going to work, at least, I would say.
And, another question along those same lines would be, how much, do I have to pay up front? Because if you haven't been in the market, or if you're a first-time buyer, you may not know how much you need to pay up front, and they don't know.
I think another question too might be, what kind of contractors do you have? Do you have access to people that can help me clean the house? Do I need to have a packer? How about a moving company? So I think that having those resources is another question to ask. And most professional agents do have a kind of a back pocket list of names for people to be able to support that seller through the transaction and getting ready as well.
Carrie, you were going to say something?
Well, one of the things that I just want to make sure that our prospective sellers are asking as well, and knowledgeable as well, is, how do you work? How do you represent me? So here in Colorado, we have two different ways that we can work, and it's definitely different across the nation. So you're going to want to be sure and ask your real estate professional when you're at that initial listing appointment, how do you work? How do you represent me? And so here in Colorado, there's two different ways. We can either be a seller's agent, where we're really an advocate, negotiate for you, get you the best possible price and terms, or a transaction broker, which again is a critical component. They're just making sure the transaction is done according to the letter of the law, but they don't have that fiduciary responsibility. So you want to find out, how are you going to be working through this transaction with me? And then also, what happens if a buyer comes to our home and you're going to bring the buyer as well? How does that work? How does that relationship, working relationship, change? So again, that's really important to touch base on. Maybe don't get stuck in the weeds on that one, but definitely touch base and find a high level. How does this work between us, and what happens if you bring the buyer as well?
I think that's a great conversation that needs to be had, because it can be, most people don't know that you have that responsibility as a listing agent to meet your client's needs. You have that fiduciary responsibility, and if that shifts to a transaction, it's a big difference in what you can and how you work. And so, maybe a question would be, can I have you only be a listing agent and never become a transaction agent? I guess that would be also a way of asking that question, if you only want them to work on your behalf. And at least it would open up the conversation as far as what, well, you could bring up, well, what if a buyer comes to me? How do you want me to handle that? And you could have that conversation then. So that's a good one as well.
That transaction brokerage versus seller agency is happening all the time. The last 3 or 4 transactions, I've had unrepresented buyers contact me directly instead of having a buyer's agent. So that is an important key question, to understand completely what that listing agent is intending to do when an unrepresented buyer comes into the transaction.
There's probably a dozen other questions you'll come up with, and if you have some questions that you want these guys to answer, put them in the comments below and we'll bring them up on a future show, because I think that's important as well, that you can talk to them and get some feedback as well. And you might say, well, you forgot to ask this. Well, now we'll bring it up and say, yes, that was a great question we should have brought up in this program. And maybe in a future week we'll talk about questions you should be asking your buyer's agent. So I appreciate this conversation today. Like every week, we have Nancy Alexander here to give us some mortgage insights. And this week, we're going to talk about investment properties. Hi, Nancy.
I'm Rick. How are you?
I'm doing great. You?
Good. Good, sir.
Awesome. So what I'm thinking about is, I just want to buy an investment property and I don't want to put a ton down. Is that possible? And maybe I do need to put more down, but how does it work? I haven't ever bought one.
Well, to buy an investment property, minimum, if you go Fannie Freddie, you're putting 20% down. And it's because investment properties won't play in the mortgage insurance market. So if you're going to jump into an investment property, you've got to minimum have that down. You're not going to like your pricing a whole lot on Fannie and Freddie at 20% down. There's a significant difference if you can put 25% down. So if you're going to add on that extra 5%, you're going to find that to be something you want to go after.
Okay. And of course, the mortgage insurance that you were referring to on a standard mortgage, you can get, and then you can drop after 20%. But because that is this is an investment property, you don't get that option. So what is the bank, or what are they looking for? Is it just my income? Can I afford to do this on my own? Is it the cash flow of the rental property? If it's an investment property, how does that work?
Good question. It's a combination. What you brought up, it's absolutely a combination. It's, if you're staying, again, Fannie Freddie, it's income based, in other words, debt to income, but it's also, we're taking into consideration of the potential rents of that property. So for example, if we say the property is going to rent for $2,000, right, we'll give you $1,500 a month, because the lender is always going to hold back 25% of those rental income numbers for your repairs and maintenance. So again, if you're saying we're going to rent at 2,000, we'll give you 1,500 towards that debt to income. So really the gap you're filling, Rick, in that equation is just $500. It's like adding a car payment to your DTI, right?
Yeah. And what is the risk to me, other than if everything goes south and I can't rent it, or the rental income goes way down and it doesn't cash flow? Obviously, if I can afford to make up the difference, I just live through that. If I can't and everything goes south, what's my exposure? Does it hit my primary?
You can't jump in without reserves.
Okay.
And so you can't jump in this pool without having 6 months reserves for every property you own. And what reserves equal or equate to is the full debt on the property, meaning your monthly debt. So your PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. If you have an HOA, that's on your primary residence, that's on the investment property. So you've got to have a nice sized pool of reserves, because again, Fannie and Freddie are saying, what happens if your lease goes away, right? What happens if that rental income drops?
Right.
So if you don't have the reserves, you can't jump into the pool.
Okay, so in addition to my 20% or 25%, and in our example there of $2,000 a month is my potential expenses on this property, I need to have another $24,000 sitting in a reserve, correct?
Exactly right. Now, if you go, you and I were chatting a little bit about these DSCR loans. This debt service coverage ratio is what they're called, and they're non-QM loans, so they're out of the qualified mortgage product. So they don't run with Fannie and Freddie guidelines, but can you jump into those loans with 10% down, 15% down? You can, but you've got prepayment penalties. You're still going to need the reserves. The property will carry the debt versus your income carrying the debt in the equation. So there's a little different twist on there that you can jump in with less down, but you pay the price in that prepayment penalty. You pay the price in your interest rate, no question.
And on the flip side, or all the way down to it all goes to pot, and I can't sell it, and it won't cash flow, and I can't get a renter. Is it just the house in either of those programs that is the rental property? Is that the asset that the bank is banking on, or is it other things relative to my other assets?
Another great question. It is the asset, right? Again, remember, a mortgage loan means that you're putting it on a residence, which is a piece of real estate, which is the asset that the lender is holding, is saying this is equal to the value of the loan that we're giving. And so, yes, if you're going down that path that you can't find a renter, you can't pay the rent, then you're looking at the exact same thing. If it were your primary residence, you're looking at foreclosure eventually.
So therefore, my FICO score is going to take a hit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a great market to play in, but it's like, know your market. No, it's like anything, Rick, you and I have talked about. It's location, location, location. Where are you buying? How do you manage it? There's a lot of people that do really, really well in the investment market. It's like anything. Know what you're getting into, right?
So next week, I think what we should do is talk about, say my primary residence is almost paid off, and I'm thinking of still getting an investment property, maybe some options there. How's that sound?
Absolutely.
Sounds great. Well, if you want to talk to Nancy, feel free to reach out to her. She's got lots of great information. That's why she's one of the pros on the Pro Show. And I appreciate your time yet again this week. Thanks, Nancy. When you're staging your living room, there's a lot of details that you want to look at. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And Debbie, what are some areas they need to think about when they're looking to stage their living room?
Well, I think you always have to really look at what the camera sees, not so much what the individual sees when they first walk in. That's kind of secondary. I guess that's important, but one of the things that you really want to do is you want to see what the camera sees. So artwork is, I think, very key. I think it should be consistent. It should have its same coloration throughout that whole living space, depending on what colors that you're going to choose. What's the sofa color? Do I have carpet to contend with? That type of thing. But I also think that photography and like artwork should be hung a little bit low so that it looks a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more artsy, I guess might be the right word.
Yeah, it's more centered in the picture when it's taken, as opposed to where you might normally have it a little bit higher. Carrie, what other things I need to think about when I'm working on a living room?
I always say less is more. So you just want to put away the knickknacks and those little treasures that you might have from that past vacation. So let's highlight those built-in shelves. Let's not have a bunch of tchotchkes or knickknacks. And please put away the personal photos. It's so distracting for clients and realtors alike when we come in, when we see that fabulous family photo and that adorable little grandkid. It distracts our eyes, and even us professionals, we kind of tend to gravitate and want to see who lives there. And it's just distracting. We want to showcase that fireplace or those great high ceilings or large windows. So less is more when staging a living room.
Does that include furniture?
Furniture, we want to function with a flow. So I think what it's really important for me is I like to think of it as if there's 3 or 4 people walking into the room together. Is there a nice flow, or are we going to feel all congested there walking in? Because typically it is. It's the realtor along with maybe a couple or some kids. And so the more congested it is when you walk into that room, the tighter it's going to feel. So make sure that you might have to move that sofa into a direction that just makes it feel larger and not as congested. You might have to take out an end table or maybe a rock or something along those lines to make it feel larger and more spacious, less congested.
And Debbie, I've seen homes where the initial pictures that we did, the layout may be one thing, and then once you see them, the agent will come back and go, yeah, we need to reconfigure this because how you live may be different than how you want to show it.
Well, and I also think that's correct. And I also think, to Carrie's point, it's really important that when you walk in, you see how your buyer is going to envision themselves living in that space. So if it's very congested and we have super large furniture, this happens often. We have a nice big room, but maybe they have a sectional sofa in there that takes up the entire space. And that's great for living because everybody's kind of jumping on the couch and watching movies in that space. But with that large furniture, sometimes that large room may look just entirely too small, and it's hard for a buyer to envision their furniture and their lifestyle being able to live in that space.
So Debbie, how much depersonalization should I do? Like Carrie was saying.
As close as you possibly can. 100% would be great. There's actually been properties that I've walked into that I know the seller. You know, with my buyer, I'm walking in and seeing that family photo and I go, oh, I know that person. It's very distracting. And I think it also, kind of sets you up for a little bit of negotiation on the sales price. Let's just say that.
And Carrie?
I think the other thing, there's some little things that we should address as well. So, in my house, in my living room, I've got cozy blankets and cozy pillows because that's how I live in my home. But those things probably need to be put away along with dog toys, cat toys, kid toys. Put those in the closet, put them away. I mean, obviously you have to live in your home, pull them out, enjoy them. But for pictures and as much as possible for showings, put those things maybe in the garage or in a closet. and just keep it as clean and streamlined. Obviously, when you walk into a show home or a model home in new construction, you want to live there. It feels great. So as much as you can get to that, that's fantastic. But again, we know you have to live in a home, but some of those easy things that are free, put the blankets away. Maybe you need a pop of color with a pillow here and there, but just kind of keep it as clean as you can.
And windows, lighting, all that. Is that important, Debbie?
It's very important. The coloration of individual lights could vary quite greatly. You've got the blue LED all the way to the very super yellow LED, and that is very important to be consistent. Whatever your style is that you would like to keep, fine, but for at least an individual room, and specifically the living room, you want to try to get that moderate tonnage. I forget what the numbers are, but somewhere in the daylight range or the reveal range is probably better than having something that's inconsistent. One blue light, one yellow light, probably not doesn't look as comfortable and doesn't feel as comfortable when you walk into that room.
Carrie, what about cleaning windows?
Well, and windows are kind of a tricky one. I mean, of course, in a perfect world, I would love to have those windows spotless and clean. But we do live in Colorado. I mean, there could be a snowstorm tomorrow and you've just paid $700 to have your windows cleaned. So I think it's one of those things we just do the best we can. I just want to make sure our clients are realizing when we're communicating all these best scenarios, it would be great if that was doable, but we completely understand that that's not doable in all cases. So on a hierarchy, frankly, I would rather have the living room depersonalized and decluttered than having windows clean, because the more square footage we showcase in the living room and the more we can make it feel like that buyer wants to live there and envision themselves there, that will have them basically pony up and purchase your property. So that's what we really want to do, have them envision themselves living in your home. So on a hierarchy, Rick, windows are down there for me.
Any other tips for living room staging?
Please do not use this air fresheners, air scents. Sometimes I have clients, and myself included, sometimes we'll walk in a home and it will be so overpowering. While this smell or scent may be wonderful to you, it is not wonderful to everybody. Sometimes I've had clients where they've had to step out of the house because it was giving them a headache. The other thing is, so many times the clients say, well, what are they hiding? What smell are they trying to cover up? So just a nice, fresh, clean your home. That's the right smell that you want to have in your home. But these little plug-ins and glades and different things are not necessarily appealing to everybody.
Yes, my wife would never buy a house that smelled like that. Debbie, any other tips?
I think television placement and the cables associated with the television is also another aspect that you want to really look at. We get used to seeing what we live in all the time. We kind of get sight blind to it, but where the television sits is important. Buyers will walk in and say, okay, where do I put my television? And if we've got a TV that's on maybe a nightstand or something like that that's in the middle of the living room, that might be something to reconsider and to position more appropriately, even if we do have to move the furniture around to accommodate that.
Well, that's great tips. And the cool thing is, if you find a professional realtor like Carrie or Debbie, they can just walk in and go, okay, you need to do this, 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 and this. And my only tip is listen to them, because they're the ones who are looking at your house with fresh eyes. And I think that's important. And, either they'll be helping you. These two would probably be, in their jeans helping to move stuff around and getting it set up. Or they'll at least say, this is what I think you should do. Or this is such a big task because you've got so much stuff. I recommend you bring in a stager to at least deal with your great room area. And I think that's probably something that has been done by both Carrie and Debbie over the years as well, to make that, when it gets a little bit, beyond just basic staging or, the normal staging. So living rooms, it's a great place. It's something people want to really feel at home in. And so you really want to keep that in mind when you're doing your staging and getting your home ready for sale.
We are excited to show you this fantastic ranch home located in Talon's Reach.
This home is situated on a large lot which is fully maintained by the HOA. Hi, I'm Allie Pope.
And I'm Shannon Pace. We're with your Fresh Start group. Come and take a look around.
This is a home for sale by Shannon Pace. She's one of the agents on the Pro Show. And this is an HDR video tour created by Rockin' Media.
Isn't this a beautiful home?
It's even better in person.
Give us a call. We'd love to show it to you.
I really appreciate Debbie and Carrie being with me today to talk about staging and talking about questions that that you should be asking when you're talking to a listing agent and interviewing them. And it's great having you on again. And if you want to get a hold of them, you can do so by talking to them and giving them a call on either of these numbers. In addition to that, if you want to find out more real estate information from the real estate pros that we have on this show, feel free to go to theproshow.com or check your podcasts like Apple Podcasts or Spotify podcasts if you just want to listen to it in the car. And I appreciate your time today and look forward to seeing you again next week.